very, very quickly, I was feeling what I would describe as unhappy. Pleasure plus people plus memory equal enjoyment. Like, decide right now, do you have a meaning crisis? We're gonna ask 2 questions and it's gonna help you decide if you have a meaning crisis. So the first question. Hey friends, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, which you probably are because I'm pretty much new here, I've only been making videos for a couple of months now, but I am so enjoying myself so far. But yeah, if you're new here, hello, I'm Kayla, I'm 25. I'm currently working as a travel physical therapist and living in Hawaii. And I post content mostly focused around how I try to live a happier, more intentional life, as well as personal finance content. And I am so excited to be starting this happy hour series with you today. Happy hour is a series that's just gonna be all about my personal happiness journey, all the ups, all the downs, and all the tidbits I learn along the way. But what I'd love more than anything is if it can also just be a space where I open up a discussion for you to let me know what you think about the information I share and just tell me a little bit about where you are in your happiness journey. So please leave a comment. Let me know how you feel about the information I share today. I would love to hear from you. And if you're struggling in your personal happiness journey, you're in the right place, and I want you to know you are not alone. Like I said, welcome to Happy Hour, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite podcasts, honestly, one of the only podcasts that I listen to. It is called The Happiness Lab. It is run by Dr. Laurie Santos, who is a professor on a class, a really famous class, I'll add, at Yale, all about happiness. And on this episode, she's having Dr. Arthur Brooks come on. And if you don't know who he is, which I didn't know either, but he's apparently just another happiness expert. He wrote a book with Oprah called How to Build the Life You Want. And yeah, he just kind of comes on and shares his thoughts and what he knows about how we can make our lives happier, which is what we all want. So today I'm just gonna talk and kind of review what I took away from that podcast and what I think about what he shared and how I've tried to implement some of the things that he shares into my own life and why I think they're really helpful. So I am ready to go. I have my water. I have my podcast notes. Here they are. Just some things I wrote down about the podcast. And before we dive into my thoughts on the podcast, I do just want to share with you my happiness journey and like how I got to be the person that cares so much about trying to build a happier life. Like I said, I currently work as a travel physical therapist. I'm 25, so I did that path really quickly. I did undergrad, which is 4 years, and then physical therapy school is a doctorate. And so that took another 3 years. And then after that, I was just so burnt out. Like, I am the student of all students. I'm a type A person. So like when I was a student, I was giving it everything that I had in honestly like a toxic way and just not having another life. But after I finished school, and I was so relieved. I took probably about 2 months off, which doesn't feel like much time, but honestly, it's way more than a lot of my classmates. So many of them went into the workforce maybe a couple weeks after we finished. And I don't know, I just couldn't do it. I was like, I need a break. Like, I just want to live life for a second without being a thing, like being a student or being a physical therapist. Like, I just wanted to be me. And I really enjoyed those 2 months. I just kind of explored more about myself, I think, and what things I found that I like to do. I started doing things like reading and going to parks and just stuff I was never doing as a student because I was always studying. And then I started listening to this podcast, The Happiness Lab, and I was learning so much about just what it takes to be happy and diving into topics like emotional well-being and like empathy and gratitude. And I feel like I was just learning so much. And as I was learning and exploring myself, it was time to get to work. And I started my permanent job I want to get this right. So I graduated in May of 2024. So yeah, I started my permanent job in July of 2024 after taking a couple of months off. And very quickly, I was feeling what I would describe as unhappy. Like, I just felt like I was giving my entire self to something again. Physical therapy is something that is like really important to me and near and dear to my heart. And that comes from a chronic illness I have called CIDP. I've talked about that in other videos too. And I plan to do another whole video on that, but that is not the point right now. But because I had a chronic illness in life, I did have a lot of physical therapy. And I could go on and on about that, but I think it just gives me a unique perspective and so much empathy for patients. All of that to say, once I began my work, I was just fully throwing myself into it, researching more, feeling like I'm not adequate in this position and like I need to know more if I'm going to serve these patients. And I was just exhausted. Like, within a couple of months, by Christmas, I was telling my family, like, I cannot do this. I don't know what else I can do, but I can't do this. And so in like around Christmas, New Year, I made the decision, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to switch things up. And I started travel physical therapy, which I thought was a really nice option. One, it pays more, which is nice, but more in the vein of happiness. I thought that it would give me a little bit more control over my free time. I can set my hours to a degree. I can decide how much vacation I want because contracts are only 3 months long. And if I want to take a longer break and am financially able, then I can. And yeah, it's been great. I'm on my second contract right now. I did a contract in Annapolis, Maryland. And now, like I said, doing one in Hawaii, which is just a dream come true and so amazing. But I would say that the move to Hawaii did not make me just as unbelievably happy as I thought it would. I'm loving my time here. And I think that my happiness has definitely increased since I got here. I've been here a little over a month now. And I would give credit to just some of the things I learned in this podcast as a reason why. But that being said, I know how bad that sounds. Like, oh, I moved to Hawaii and I still wasn't happy. And I just think I had so much guilt around that. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? Each time I start a new contract, like it's exciting. Oh, I did something new. But I'm like, is my like overall happiness any different? I don't think so. And I was just feeling like that was a problem. And so I started searching through the happiness lab a little bit and just trying to find something to support me in this time and just kind of change my outlook on what my current happiness was, and stumbled across this episode. And that's how we got here. I love the episode. And I can't wait to tell you some things that I learned. So let's get into it. One of the first things they really get into on this podcast is trying to get Arthur's definition of happiness. And when they got into this, I was about ready to skip. I was like, okay, I know this. If you watch my other video where I talk about this podcast, I call it happiness habits. And they get into a definition. They're like, okay, it's defined with 3 things. And that's what they started off here. Arthur was like, I really define it by 3 things. And I was like, cool, alignment, contentment, control. I got it. And no, Arthur has a whole different definition, which made me just feel like, ugh. Okay, like I thought I knew the definition. Now there's a different definition. And Arthur talks about this a little bit on the podcast and just says how different experts have like slightly differing opinions, and that's okay. So we're gonna roll with that. That's okay. But anyways, Arthur uses this metaphor to define happiness and says that there are 3 things that make up happiness, and he thinks of them as macronutrients, like the stuff that builds happiness. Just like our food has 3 macronutrients: carbs, fats, and oh, that's embarrassing. I should know that. Carbs, fats. Oh, and protein. Carbs, fats, and protein. That's food. Happiness, macronutrients or ingredients are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And so there's kind of a different takeaway from each different macronutrient. So I want to talk about each of those individually, starting with enjoyment. And when he said enjoyment, I really just thought, okay, like duh, like, yeah, this is a positive word. We got to enjoy things to be happy. But it's just so much deeper than that. And he really takes time to separate out enjoyment from pleasure. And like I said, this podcast is all about the science of happiness. And so they get into that and they talk about how pleasure is really just a signal from our brain that says, oh, I like this thing. Do more of it. With pleasure, as long as you don't continue to receive that signal. So let's think like I'm getting a signal from eating a chocolate bar and my brain is like, oh, this will give me calories. This is good. And once I stop eating the chocolate bar, I don't feel that much pleasure anymore. Like pleasure eventually fades. And that's why we can't use it to lead to our long-term happiness, and why it's so hard to have just one cookie. Like you eat the cookie and your brain's like, yes, calories, more, you should like that. And you're like, okay, another one, yes. And it's just like constantly wants you to keep going so that you keep feeling the pleasure. So that's just not sustainable long-term. What enjoyment is, Arthur even gives it like a formula. And I love it because I feel like it makes sense. The formula he gives is pleasure plus people plus memory equal enjoyment. So it takes more than just pleasure for us to enjoy life. And a nice rule of thumb that he throws out there is if you have this thing that you do that brings you pleasure and you're constantly doing it alone, you are probably doing it wrong. And not to say, there are some things that we do alone and that's fine, but I think it's nice to think about, okay, what are the things that bring me pleasure and could they be enhanced by doing it with somebody else? Like for me, listening to this podcast and just thinking through it and applying it to my life brings me a lot of pleasure. And that's why I'm so excited to be sharing it with you, because I think that adding people to that pleasure and then just cementing this and knowing that I'll be able to look back and remember my thoughts on it, pleasure, people, memory, is really going to lead to just long-term enjoyment in this activity. And that example is like really personal. But the other example that Arthur gives about just showing how pleasure is much better as enjoyment is like a beer ad. You never see just somebody alone on their sofa opening up a beer, like in a Corona commercial, just like, oh yeah, Corona, just me. I'm so happy. Like, you don't see that. But what they do is they show like a person with all their friends around them, like cracking a can. Like there's even one where they do Sweet Caroline, I think, and you walk in a bar. I don't know if this is Corona, but a beer commercial. This person walks in a bar and they walk in and they're looking around and they just see everyone having fun. And like, I think the people there are like, ba, ba, ba. And the person is just feeling so happy. They're like, okay, I'm surrounded by people. This is going to be a lot of fun. That's how they sell you the beer. That's how they sell that this is going to be an enjoyable thing and not just pleasure. So yeah, I thought that example was really helpful for me to think, okay, yeah, like maybe there's something to adding people in memory to my pleasurable experiences. So I encourage you to do the same. You know, if you have a pleasurable experience that you're doing alone all the time, especially if it can be addictive, like something like alcohol, just think about if there's ways you can integrate people into it in your life and just make it more of a memory and help you enjoy that. All right, so that's enjoyment. The next thing that he talks about is satisfaction. That's like the next macronutrient in our happiness journey. And again, this just sounded like a positive word. Okay, I need to be satisfied. I'm going to be happy. I didn't know that there was going to be so much to it, but I'd say this satisfaction one was the most eye-opening to me in my understanding of why my happiness isn't lasting. Oh, and satisfaction is also, it's like really refreshing to me because I'm just not somebody who's happy all of the time. It's not me. I think it's a reason I dig into the happiness research so much because I'm like, I feel like I should be happier more than I am. I should be happy more than I am, but like I'm not happy all the time. And I think that each time I get sad or angry or feel these negative emotions, I'm like, dang it, like I'm supposed to be feeling happy and I down myself. But satisfaction is actually a happiness component that requires negative emotions to come along with it. So let me explain. Arthur defines satisfaction as the joy we get after a struggle. Like it's not just the joy we get. So think about graduating. Like people feel, graduation pictures on Instagram get so many likes, so much love. People feel so proud of themselves. Like they're really satisfied with having graduated. So that's going to be like my everybody example to think about with satisfaction. My personal example, just reflecting on my journey with CIDP, there was a time when I was not able to walk. I was in a wheelchair. I graduated to like being in a walker, but there was a time when I couldn't move like me. Like I was an athlete in high school. This happened. I got sick when I was in high school, and to be down to like a walker and going into starting college was not me at all. And I worked my tail off. And then also got lucky with the fact that treatments finally worked and were able to help me. And like just really was grinding to try my freaking hardest to get back to being me. But clearly, like I'm not that person anymore. I'm not in a wheelchair anymore. I can move around just fine. But I just know, I remember when I first was able to do things, like walk, but especially doing things like running, like I was so proud of myself. I felt what I would describe as really happy. And now I would define it more as like, I just felt so satisfied. Like every single day I would wake up and I would think, thank goodness I can walk, I can run. Like that just makes me so happy. But the thing about satisfaction is just like pleasure, it fades. Like you get proud of yourself for doing this thing that took a struggle, that required this negative emotion. And then after a little while, you just stop thinking about it and you go back to like your baseline happiness level. Just think about how excited you probably felt when you graduated, or if you didn't graduate, just think, any exciting thing in life that you worked really hard for, like getting a new car, or maybe even obtaining like a relationship that you were seeking after. Really think of just, you can apply it to any personal struggle you've had and how happy, excited, satisfied you were once it worked out the way you wanted it to work out. And just how much do you think about that thing today? Like, do you wake up proud of yourself for graduating every single day? I know I don't get up anymore and think about how happy I am to be walking. Like, no, I roll out of bed, I brush my teeth, like I get into my day, I go to work, and then I think about how I don't want to be at work. Like I'm not satisfied with it anymore. And the reason this hits so hard for me is because I wasn't happy in my permanent job. I started travel and I recognize that like I'm literally chasing satisfaction. I want to start something new, do it for 3 months, not too long, because then it will become not exciting, not making me happy anymore. And then I can just start a new contract in another 3 months. And I'm just chasing like the high of satisfaction over and over and over again. And it makes sense why it's not lasting, because I'm working for something, I'm getting it, and then I'm going back to my baseline happiness. And there's a reason for this that will make a lot of sense to like you science-based people like I am, and it's called homeostasis. Honestly, we probably all learned about homeostasis like maybe in high school or middle school, I don't know. But if you haven't heard about homeostasis before, I think of it much more like biologically. Like homeostasis is the reason that we sweat when we're hot, our body's trying to cool us down. Homeostasis is the reason that our teeth chatter when we're cold, because your body wants to like move really fast and create heat. It's also the reason that our emotions just don't last. Like your body has a tendency to return to baseline. So when you struggle really hard for this thing and then you become satisfied and you're riding this high, eventually you stop thinking about that and you'll slowly head back to your baseline. And when I heard that, while I was excited that it kind of explained what I was feeling happiness wise and why I felt like I was like riding this roller coaster of I'm happy, I'm not, I'm happy, I'm not. It's also discouraging to just hear like, yeah, that's what happens. You know, you get happy and they're not happy and you get happy, but you'll probably never stay happy / satisfied. That was really discouraging. And the name for this whole phenomenon is called the hedonic treadmill. And it's just the idea that like you get on the treadmill, you run, you try to find success, you get there, and then the feeling fades, so you just get back on the treadmill. But there are ways to combat this hedonic treadmill. What Arthur does is he makes a reverse bucket list. He said every year on his birthday, he writes down all the things that he thinks he wants to do before he dies, and then he just crosses them out. And the idea is like, these things will not define my happiness. I know that, okay, if I get to Greece before I die, it's not going to make like a long-term change on my happiness. I'll be happy that I was in Greece for that time, and then I'll go back to my regular life. So it's just the thinking of like these bucket list items and these things, milestones we think we need to hit to be happy in life will not define our happiness. So I think that's really cool and a nice exercise that I hadn't thought to do before. But what I've really been doing more recently is just creating a gratitude journal. And I've got a virtual gratitude journal right now. I just use Notion and I can put up like what it looks like. But, you know, just the typical at the end of the day or some point in the day. I've been doing it at the end of the day because I think it's just a nice like cap to the whole day, but writing down 3 to 5 things that I feel really grateful for. And oh my gosh, I forgot to do this shout out. But the reason that I even thought to do a video like this is because of a creator named Zoe Pritchard. I love watching her channel. She feels so authentic, and she does these things called Sunday chats where she talks about like what's going on in her life at the time and tries to get some viewer input and what they're thinking about in life. Zoe, I hope I'm representing your Sunday chats right. But yeah, she does Sunday chats, and that's what gave me the idea to like have a sit down chat, period. And because I'm so interested in happiness, I wanted it to be a happy hour. All of that is to say, I saw on Zoe's Instagram that she mentioned like if you've been doing like the gratitude journal thing for a while and you're tired of writing down just 3 things you're grateful for, try to maybe reframe it and say like 3 things you love. Like, I love that I have a supporting family, or I love that I have a stable job. Whatever it is that you love, and like of course we're grateful for the things we love, and maybe reframe it like that. So yeah, gratitude and maybe a reverse bucket list are some really nice ideas for trying to combat this hedonic treadmill chase of satisfaction. Okay, the next happiness ingredient is meaning. And I've got my notes here because honestly, I'm still trying to understand like what makes up meaning and just why it's so important in our happiness journey. So I just want to refer to like specifically what I've written down about this. But yeah, like I said, this one is tough for me. I feel like with enjoyment, I was like, okay, here's how I can make my life more enjoyable. With satisfaction, I was like, okay, here's how I can stop chasing satisfaction. But for meaning, like understanding the meaning of life is something that I really struggle with. I think that this struggle really started when I did a stint in the neuro ICU as a student. I did a clinical there, and the neuro ICU is like a very tough place to work. It is where people go if they've had a stroke. It is where sometimes trauma overload goes if they're not like in a life-threatening situation, but because of trauma, they've got a brain injury. So people who like were driving to work one day and then get into a car accident, and all of a sudden they have a traumatic brain injury and cannot remember their family or who they are. Just things like that are super, super heavy. And we were bouncing as physical therapy from room to room. So like I go in and I see the person who was just driving to work and now they can't remember themselves. And then I go into a new room and I see like a husband who's 68 with his wife who is in like a comatose state and he's dealing with all of that. And just, it was like nothing I've ever experienced before. I saw all these people whose lives were changing right before their eyes and they had no idea it was going to happen and probably would have done some things a little differently if they knew that things would change right at this moment. And it just made me think like, okay, what is the point in all of this? What is the point in physical therapy school? What is the point in going to become a physical therapist? Like, what if I die tomorrow? I'm just going to have been a student who worked like all their life. I know I'm like, this is me in that student mode. I'm thinking like, okay, I know I'm only 22 or 23, but like, if I die right now, am I going to be happy that I spent all of my adult life as a student? I don't know. And I think that's where my meaning crisis really started. But yeah, that's just my struggle with meaning. I want to break down meaning a little bit more for how Arthur defines it. And maybe you can start to think about, I don't know, if you understand the meaning of life or if you feel like you have meaning in your life, the meaning of your life. He defines it by breaking it down a little bit more, like I said, into 3 parts. So coherence, purpose, and significance. And coherence is, why do things happen the way they do? Like just believing that things happen for a reason, which we have a natural tendency to do as humans. Like once a thing happens, we assign a meaning to it after a little bit of time. And then purpose. Purpose is understanding, what are your goals? What are your direction? What is the goal of my life? And then significance, like, does it matter that you're alive? Rather than me just talking about my meaning crisis, Arthur gives an exercise on how to like decide right now, do you have a meaning crisis? We're going to ask 2 questions and it's going to help you decide if you have a meaning crisis. So the first question, why are you alive? It's not supposed to be biological answers, like not because my mom and dad made me, but why are you alive? Why do you believe you are on this earth? And then 2, for what are you willing to die? And like I said, I had a really hard time with that. Not going to lie to you, I don't have a great reason for why I'm alive. I've lamented over it. And if I had to, was put to a fire and had to say, why am I alive? I would say to be a protector and like just to love and support my siblings. I have 3 younger siblings. I'm a lot older than all of them, like 6 to 9 years older. And like, I love them. And I love them more than anything. So yeah, if I had to say why I'm alive, it would be that. The only hesitancy I have with that, which is just as much as I love them, I don't think that that's the only thing I'm meant to do. Like I'm not just meant to protect them. I also want to have like an amazing, wait, my notes are going out, like an amazing, wonderful, filled life. So that's my only hesitancy there. And I'm like, okay, is that a good enough answer? Like, I don't know. And then the next one, for what am I willing to die? It would be my siblings. Like, just love them more than anything and will do anything, would give them anything. And if I would be willing to die for them. So that one, I think I've got my answer for. I'm still trying to figure out the why am I alive answer. 2 other examples, if you want someone who's like got their stuff together and knows, doesn't have a meaning crisis. Arthur gives an example of his son. When he asked him, why am I alive? He was able to say, I don't want to misquote it, but it was something along the lines of like, because God put me on this earth, or like to serve God, something religious in that manner. And then what am I willing to die for? I think it was my faith, my family, and my country, something like that. And Arthur makes a point to say like, okay, yeah, those are my son's answers. Your answers don't need to be anything like that, but it's a person who feels meaning in their life. That is their reasoning for why they're alive and they have a sense of meaning. So that's an example that's like not someone who's struggling with a meaning crisis. This is where the definitions of happiness get interesting for me, because I would say that I feel like I'm living like a pretty happy trajectory life right now. And I do feel like maybe I have a meaning crisis and I'm like, okay, well, is that okay then? Do I need meaning to be happy? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Like, how important do you feel like meaning is to happiness? Okay, so all of that is just Arthur's definition of happiness. That's like rounding that out. But the other thing I really want to share with you is just some practical things they talked about on how to be happier. If we don't feel like we've got enough examples yet, I just want to make sure this video has enough, like it's informative enough to take and move forward and do something about your happiness. So some of the things they talked about for like practical ways to be happier us's, people, we's, I don't know, is making a negativity journal. So this is funny because like it sounds so bad and opposite of a gratitude journal, but the idea, it's based on two concepts. So the first one is negativity bias. We as humans have a tendency where like in our current situation, we will see the negative. Once we get home from work, we're like, oh, what a long day. And we don't think at all about the fact that we have a home and we have a job and we have money. That is negativity bias. We have a tendency towards, in the current, feeling negative about things. And then there's fading affect bias, which is funny because it's the opposite. And it's like, but as negative as you perceive things right now, if you look back on times in life, you usually see the best parts of it. For example, since I've talked so much about CIDP today, CIDP is one of the hardest things. No, CIDP is the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. It was absolutely the worst. Like I said, I want to talk more about it, but this is not the video for it. But if you ask me about it today, as much as I would like cry and tell you how rough it was, I would say that I would not change it for the world. I think that I'm who I am today because I was put through this just grueling, difficult, unexpected time, and I love who I've become. And so I would not change it. I can't change it. And that's fading affect bias, where we look back on things that we felt were so negative in the moment and we say, I'm happy that happened. Those two concepts create why we should do a negativity journal. So a negativity journal is when you write down a negative, bad thing that happened to you in life. Like in the moment, you're like, I hate that today. I don't know what's something that negative has happened to me recently. I haven't had like a huge negative that I felt like was big enough to put in the journal recently, but I'm going to try to think back to an event that happened before I got into this episode of this podcast. Okay, the only thing I can really think to that I feel like would be big and negative enough is like if I have an argument with Devin. Devin is my boyfriend. He is my partner of 7 years. Love him to death. I live with him here in Hawaii. But let's be real. We've been dating for 7 years. We argue. So the idea is like if I have a really bad argument with him, I would write down in my negativity journal, like today we had an argument. It was about this. I'm really upset about it. And then you're supposed to come back. Let me make sure. What are the time frames? Okay. So 1 month later, you come back and you write down, what did you learn from that? Like, okay, we argued. And from that, I learned that his communication style is like he needs 5 minutes to gather himself rather than talking about something in the moment. And then 6 months later, you write, what is a good thing that happened because of that? And like maybe for an argument, it's like, well, we now understand each other so much more. And when an incident like that happens, I've been able to reflect and think, I need to give him 5 minutes. Or anything that, I don't know why I closed that. I could need those. Or anything negative that happens to you. You write it down in this negativity journal and you set like a reminder on your phone at 1 month and 6 months that you need to go back and you need to put these thoughts about it in there. And so I have a space for that in my gratitude journal, like a negativity space about what something bad that happened to me today. If I feel like there's something that's worth putting in there, and I haven't had to use that yet, but I'm excited now for this bad thing to happen and make the best of it, which is also like the point of it, right? Then we kind of look forward to like, oh, a negative thing happened to me. And that just in itself reframes it for us. Okay, the other thing that they talked about doing practically was just creating habits for yourself that lead to happiness. And they talk about how our baseline happiness is made up of 3 things. Those 3 things are our genetics, our circumstances, and our habits. So your genetics, you can't control. Your circumstances are like, where are you in life? How much money do you have? I guess, like, where do you live? Your habits are the thing that you truly can control. And if you want to know more about how to create some great happiness habits for yourself, I check out the other video that I did about the happiness lab. And it was just all about creating meaningful habits. So I have a place where I have those habits that I do. Some of those are weekly, some of those are daily. But what I've really done recently is create very specific daily habits. And I didn't even do it because of this. Like, I did it more because Devin is a productivity junkie. Like, we both are, but he came up with this idea and he wanted us to have daily habits that we go through together and like reward ourselves when we are very consistent with them. And I really feel like it's just given me such a routine in life and just made me, I don't know, feel at ease because I'm doing these different happiness habits or just daily habits. Yeah. So I'll put up on the screen some of the things I've been doing. But you've just got to think about what are some things that you want to incorporate into your life, daily, weekly, whatever, and just make them a habit. And I think that's another great way to just have a routine and kind of consistently do something that helps increase your happiness. So that is our happy hour. Thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to wrap up with a concept that Arthur shared during the podcast, and I want to get it right. So I'm going to read what it was he said. Happiness is not a destination. It is a direction. It's not something we're going to get to and stay there forever. And once you can reframe that and just think, I'm on my happierness journey, which is a term coined by Oprah and Arthur, not me, but like I'm just on my happierness journey and it's going to continue. Understanding that, I think, is so, so huge. Also, just a reminder, negative emotions help lead to happier us's. We shouldn't shy away from them, embrace them, and find ways to help them contribute to your happiness journey. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that this video can do a little bit to help you along your happiness journey. Let me know your thoughts about it, or just how you're feeling right now, where you feel like you are in your journey, and I will see you very, very soon for another video. Bye.